how is it to raise your own kids outside of your own countries?
I think there's a lot to gain. You get this perspective of the world and you get to know people from different cultures.
I learned so much from my mother in terms of how she parented me. She's an incredibly inspiring and positive. And so with my son, I try to emulate her style as well in terms of that positive encouragement.
What is driving this commitment working with UNICEF?
When it comes to humanitarian needs, that is regardless of, religion or ethnicity or political affiliation. All those aspects are not important. The important is the vulnerability of people and the needs on the ground.
Trust and predictability through the relationship that we have with Sweden is exactly what's needed in order to enable a swift and effective response to a humanitarian crisis.
Why does Sweden choose that approach of the flexible funding? Because normally we see a lot of donors are very specific to either like a very thematic funding.
I think for us, flexible is a way of being more efficient and being able to provide support where it is needed the most and when it is needed the most, because the timing part in a humanitarian crisis is of course of essence to saving lives.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for taking the time out. We have started this new series with UNICEF where we would like to talk to the partners who are working with UNICEF, Partners for Change series podcast, and this is the first episode. So thank you, Ambassador, for taking the time out. And Pernille, Alex, if I come to you, someone who don't know you and maybe haven't seen you, how would you introduce yourself to 18 years old watching this podcast?
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess I would start with a very normal. I'm Alex, and I'm the Swedish ambassador to Pakistan. And I'm really passionate about diplomacy, but I think that my biggest role is as a mother and a parent of two children, 9 and 12-year-olds. And we are all here and having a good time in Pakistan. That's the short introduction.
And it's been almost 2 years, I think?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Pernille, how would you introduce to someone who is 18 to 20 years old and watching you the first time?
Also a great question. I would describe myself as a passionate humanitarian. I've been serving the United Nations for over 20 years. A lot of my service has been in complex conflict-affected countries, including in Gaza, in Iraq, in Yemen, in the Congo, and then other complex but more developed countries. And I see my role as one of uplifting children wherever I go, in whatever circumstances they are, but particularly the most vulnerable kids. And then I also have a role like Alex as a parent. I'm a mom to an 8-year-old boy who's here with me. We're here together, the two of us. And I feel a strong obligation to raise him to become an amazing world citizen and a contributor and somebody who's socially conscious and aware. And we're on that journey together.
Very cool. So someone who's watching, obviously, you guys are working in the development sector, working for children. How is it to raise your own kids outside of your own countries, and especially in this really complex world and complex work as well? Because a lot of times there are emergencies, there are a lot of times you don't have really, it's not a 9-to-5 job, and you don't have as such support system as you have in your own countries. So how do you guys manage? Maybe Alex, we go with you.
Yeah, that's a question that occupies my mind quite a lot, I must say. So I've been in South Asia for over 10 years now, and not in a row, but my children and my family have been with me in a posting here in Pakistan, but also 4 years in Bangladesh. So I think that living this life where, as a diplomat or in the development humanitarian sector as Pernille is, there are definitely advantages and disadvantages with uprooting your family and your kids and moving to different countries and postings. So I think there's a lot to gain. You get this perspective of the world, and you get to know people from different cultures. I think that when I look at my children's class, it is a class of the world. They have nationalities from many different parts of the world, and they think it's natural. And also being open to different ways of thinking, different cultures. It's such a gift that we have the privilege to give our children. But then there are, of course, challenges in that. You are far away from your own country, from your own family and social networks, and trying to juggle more than full-time job with being a parent in a very dynamic environment is hard. So you have to be a manager of your respective organization and care for your colleagues, and that's a full-time job. And then you have to care for your family and your children, and that's another full-time job. So I think in one way or the other, all parents juggle this equation and try to do their best under hard and difficult circumstances. And of course, in that sense, we are privileged. We have a support system around us. So I, all respect to parents that don't have that, or as I see here in Pakistan, that have to undergo different types of crises or natural disasters, but still remain parents and look out for their children's interests. So I'm aware that I come from a privileged position in that sense, but we all juggle. Yeah.
As you guys know that this is a parenting month. Before we move to the
Yeah.
next section, in Pakistan, like when we were growing up, it was a very different parenting. It was not a problem, I would say, or a mistake of a parent, but how the society was evolving, I think. And now the millennial parents are doing parenting very differently because of the technology, because of the digital, because of understanding of how the globalization and everything. How did you guys raising your kids right now compare to how your parents raised you? Is there like sort of a different style, or is there something which you're trying to give it to them, which was not maybe there when you were growing up, or how again the society has evolved? Pernille, maybe we start from
Well, I learned so much from my mother in terms of how she parented me. She's an incredibly inspiring and positive parent. And growing up, when at times I lacked confidence, she was always there, encouraging me, giving me, reminding me of my capabilities. And so with my son, I consciously am very aware of how I try to emulate her style as well in terms of that positive encouragement. Regardless, it's so important that they know that you are their biggest cheerleader and supporter and will stand by them no matter what. And that you also allow them at times to fall or fail, and it's okay. You get back up and you try again. That's part of life, and these are things we learn. I think I also had the privilege to try different things to discover what my interests were. And here in Pakistan, there's so many diverse things to try, whether that's in sports or in the arts, the creative arts, so many different things. So giving my son that opportunity as well is something that I emulate. And having a father who was on the stricter side. My father was British. That also shaped me in terms of parenting style and the things that maybe I don't want to emulate as much, or the impact that had on me. So I'm navigating parenting on my own, but with a support structure around me. And I really rely also on my peers and friends and learning from others and exchanging, because parenting can be daunting for anybody, especially if you only have one child and you're doing it for the first time. I don't happen to have siblings either, so it's kind of through others that I also learn a lot.
I'm also a single child, so I can relate to.
You do.
But Alex, how are you doing parenting differently compared to you when you were growing up, and also doing it in this region, because you've spent a lot of years, in Pakistan, Afghanistan, Bangladesh. So there's a lot of impact from work as well as when you were growing up as well.
Yeah, I grew up in a quite traditional family where my mom is a very emotionally intelligent person. So she showered us with affection and feelings. And I think that that is one thing that I really appreciated and I got a lot of, and I try to give my children too. I think one thing that my mom also did was that she expressed herself. I mean, she was angry, and if she was sad, she was sad. So kind of that to me was a signal that feelings are okay. And that you can express them. You don't have to put them inside. And I think that my brother is the same. We saw that my mom, expressed herself, whatever she felt. And I think that there is this tendency also today in the world that there are like female emotions and male emotions. And if you are male, especially in this part of the world, you're not supposed to feel or express your feelings in the same way. So I think that her being very expressive also helped us realize that, all those feelings are okay. My father was older, so he would have been 101 years. So he had me very late, or had me and my brother very late. So he was a man of a different generation, like with few words, a little bit stricter. And he wasn't as expressive. But in my mind, there was never any doubt about how much he believed in me or how much he loved me. He just showed it in a different way. So I think that they are very, very different from each other as people, but they also provided an illustration that you can be different and be partners, and you can be, you can be expressive or less expressive, but all that is okay. So I think that in the end, I guess just transmitting to your child in the way that you are able to, that you believe in it, and that's the most important thing in your life, that you're there for no matter what, is something that I really learned from my parents, and they did it in very different ways, and I really want to give my children.
Very interesting. Again, if 17 years old kid is watching this, they will know that, okay, I understand there is an ambassador to Sweden here and UNICEF. But what do they do really in Pakistan? And because I remember, kids are kids. I remember when I was moving back to Pakistan from London after finishing journalism, I, to be honest, didn't even know what UN, I know, okay, there is this organization, it's UN, but I didn't even know they're UN Women and UNICEF and this, and what do they do really in Pakistan? So if you explain to maybe, again, like a Gen Z or someone from 16 to 20, what is UNICEF doing in Pakistan? Not just now, over the years, why are you here?
And well, UNICEF's been in Pakistan for 79 years.
Wow.
And UNICEF is almost 80 years old. So almost since the birth of UNICEF, we've been in this country serving children, working with the governments over the years to help children survive through their first birthdays into childhood and each stage of life. So, for instance, right now, Pakistan has unbelievably one of the highest mortality rates for children. It's the highest in South Asia for under 5 children. It also has 40% of children who are stunted. They're malnourished. They're not growing developmentally how they should be, and it's also affecting their brain development. We work with the government federally and in each province to tackle those really wicked problems, because unless they are resolved, the opportunity and potential for each of those children is being thwarted. And at the moment in the country, children are only reaching about 40% of their potential. This is evidence-based. This is not drawn out of the air. And think about it. Pakistan's one of the youngest countries in the world, with 67% of the population under 30 and growing. It's still one of the few countries where the population's growing for the next 40 years. If that potential is squandered, it will have a certain trajectory for those individuals, but also for the nation. We are here to support children, their families, and work with all stakeholders, whether certainly the government, but the community leaders, the religious leaders, the private sector, the development partners, all to unite and use the thought leadership that we bring, the system architecture expertise that we bring from our work around the country and around the world and here in Pakistan for the betterment of each of those children in the nation. I find it so inspiring. I am not daunted by big challenges. It's on the contrary. I love to rise to those challenges and mobilize our best efforts to work with everybody for the betterment of children. And that includes children and young people themselves. There are so many talented children, adolescents, teenagers, youth that I've met who are with very little. Sometimes it's only their own personal drive, are able to take things into their own hands and drive it forward in ways that transcend their whole community. We need more of that, and UNICEF is here to support that.
Alex, for Sweden in Pakistan, probably people might think, yes, you are here. If someone wants to go to Sweden, you can get a visa and you can go. That's like,
Wow.
is one of the component.
Yeah.
But what else do you guys do in Pakistan? And most importantly, how do you come up with the programming? Like what's important for this year or for the next few years?
Yeah. I mean, always when I get the question of what, diplomacy is or what do we do, I kind of, it's hard in a nutshell to describe it. But I think that if you start on a macro abstract level, we live in a world that is more polarized, more fragmented, where countries are turning inwards, where they are, these protectionistic and populistic sentiments. And I think that diplomacy then has a really big role to play. That is how countries speak to each other. So my main task here is represent my country and, of course, the interest of my country through building relations with different Pakistani stakeholders. And that is, of course, government, but it's so much more than that. It is government, it is business, it is civil society, it's journalists, it's students, it's young people. And I think that all of that becomes the bilateral relationship between two countries. So, of course, political exchanges would be one element, but we also have around 40 Swedish companies here that have been here for decades. Many of them, renowned brands like, everything from Ericsson to IKEA, H&M, Volvo. There are a lot of them, and that is one of those. Their interests and their ability to operate here is something that I, of course, care very deeply for. We have also Pakistani youth and students that go to Sweden to study. And then they come back and they are like as good ambassadors as I am, because they know both countries and the value base of both countries, so they can see the similarities and the difference. And then another element of what I do and diplomacy is, of course, working with partners to support your host country. So that is, for instance, where the partnership between Sweden and UNICEF comes in. We see that youth is it has immense potential in this country, but we also see that there are a lot of different challenges for children here. And we have worked for a long time with UNICEF, both here in Pakistan at the country level, but also globally, to support children and youth, and hopefully make them reach their full potential, but mostly trying to support in the different challenges that they face. So it's a very wide portfolio. This year we celebrate 77 years of bilateral relations. And I think that it's something, it is a relationship that is broad, but hopefully also there are things that we can do in the future to deepen that cooperation.
So we have talked a lot about parenting and the work which you guys are doing in partnership and also separately. A lot of them is around parenting, like mostly around humanitarian work as well. What is driving this commitment, working with UNICEF?
Well, let me just start let me just start by saying that Sweden is a great champion of the humanitarian architecture. That is something, we are a very principled humanitarian, I dare say that we are a very principled humanitarian donor, and we have supported this architecture for many decades. And when I say that we are principled, it has different elements to it that is also reflected in our partnership with UNICEF. One of them is that we always, when it comes to humanitarian support, we look at the needs on the ground. So that's the way that we decide what country or what crisis to support. So it needs to be an evidence-based, needs-based way of looking at different humanitarian crises. And that becomes even more important when there are so many different wars and conflicts in the world. So that would be one of the elements. Then another one is that we work through and with strategic partners, and UNICEF is one of them. We have had long-term, as I said before, long-term relationship with UNICEF on a global level, but also here in Pakistan. So working through strategic partners that know the realities on the ground. And the last element, I would say, is about having an impartial way of looking at things. So when it comes to humanitarian needs, that is regardless of religion or ethnicity or political affiliation. All those aspects are not important. The important part here is the vulnerability of people and the needs on the ground. So I think that is something that Sweden has been working with around the world in different crises with partners for a long time. And another element to add to this is also localization. The fact that the partners that UNICEF work with on the ground are those that know the realities in on the ground. So I think that that's also something that we look at very much when we choose where to intervene. Yeah.
Pernille, Sweden has been a very steady partner of UNICEF. How does that impact the work which you guys are doing in Pakistan, and especially knowing about, a lot of donors are moving away from Pakistan, the world is just changing, and, the priorities are changing. So how is it impacting your work in Pakistan, working with Sweden?
Has a huge impact. I mean, trust and predictability through the relationship that we have with Sweden is exactly what's needed in order to enable a swift and effective response to a humanitarian crisis. This is a country where there are multiple climate-related shocks that are happening at any given moment, alongside complex political events that can also have a humanitarian impact. So being able to have the agility to respond swiftly through a trusted partnership, and what we appreciate in particular is the flexible funding that Sweden provides to UNICEF, which essentially means it's not earmarked for any specific type of intervention, but rather they trust us to use those precious resources for how they can best serve the humanitarian need and particularly vulnerable children and mothers at that particular moment in that location. So it enables us to be very swift through our local partnerships and responsive to a range of situations. It could be the flooding, it could be drought related, and invariably it also means that we're not only responding to a single need of a child, because children are experiencing crises as whole beings. It's inevitable that the same child who has watery diarrhea because of she lacks access to clean drinking water is also at risk, or possibly already malnourished, may also be at risk of protection challenges, and is likely to have their schooling disrupted if they're of school age. So all of these considerations can also be tackled in a more integrated and thus more impactful way with such kind of flexible resources.
And why does Sweden choose that approach of the flexible funding? Because normally we see a lot of donors are very specific to either like a very thematic funding or like very specific to few things. So what's the sort of thought process behind the flexible funding?
Well, I guess that the best part about flexible funding is the flexibility of it. I mean, I think and I think that with that comes also efficiency. We all know, and there are multiple studies that show that being proactive is actually more efficient than being reactive to a crisis. So I think for us, this is a way of being both more, I mean, flexible is a way of being more efficient and being able to provide support where it is needed the most and when it is needed the most, because the timing part in a humanitarian crisis is, of course, of essence to saving lives. So I think that is something that we have been promoting for many, many decades, especially when it comes to humanitarian support. The need to actually fund before a crisis happen rather than afterwards. And also to trust the relationship with the partner so that it is, as we talked about before, needs-based. You know, you can't send field hospitals if that's not what is needed, but you can give economic support so that the partners on the ground that know the realities can see where the needs are most. And I also need to add there that, of course, with that flexibility comes responsibility. It's a trust that we put on a partner, that they use our Swedish taxpayers' money to the very best they can. Because we are, of course, also accountable to our taxpayers. They are the ones that give us the budget for humanitarian development support. So there is, of course, a dialogue that we have in the countries where we are partners, but also on global level about, you know, efficiency, about transparency, about the money that we give actually fulfilling the requirements and getting into the needs in the ground. So in short, I think that for us, flexibility is efficiency, and it's also the most impactful thing we can do in order to try to support people in need.
Pernille, with the on-ground community, is there any example which you have seen the work which you guys are doing with Sweden, especially with such a flexible funding? Any story which you can share?
Absolutely.
Like a sort of, you know, which the real impact which you have seen.
So both the 2022 floods and the floods last year in 2025 are excellent examples as to how that Sweden's flexible funding enabled that agile and impactful response swiftly. For instance, in terms, as Alex was saying, getting supplies on the ground and starting to distribute. Imagine a family has literally lost their entire home and village has been wiped out. They have nothing. There's no clean water. They're struggling to have the basics of even shelter. That's not UNICEF's what we provide, but in terms of access to feeding their children, these may be infants, clean water, all these basics. Some of those children are malnourished or at risk of being malnourished. So getting supplies to them as quickly as possible is essential. And then being able to replenish those supplies also quickly in order to have a steady, predictable kind of pipeline of those life-saving types of commodities. That's just one example of how, and I saw it personally in December. I had the opportunity I arrived a few months earlier, and I had the opportunity to visit southern Punjab to the flood-affected districts, and you know, I could see what the impact of the response was from the few months prior, and what was still ongoing, and that was made possible because of the flexible funding. Malnourishment is a huge issue during such crises because inevitably they're wiping out crops. People have far less access to food, let alone nutritious food, and hence the youngest children are particularly vulnerable to severe and acute malnutrition. And Sweden's interventions and support have been particularly impactful and life-saving in such circumstances.
Alex, can you also share any story from on ground which really sort of impacted you in the last sort of few years?
Yeah, I can. I went with UNICEF to rural Sindh, and we were in several districts. But I remember we visited a village in Jamshoro district who has quite high rates of children out of school and challenges in other ways. So I met this girl, I think her name was Fatma, she was 13, she went to school, and she wanted to be a police inspector when she grew up. And I kind of asked her, what's your source of inspiration? Why do you go to school, or what? And she pointed to an older woman who was her grandma, Numtaz. And Numtaz had come to the village at a very early age when she was newly married. And this was like, she was a grandma, but such a force of nature. So she had gone into the village and started promoting education, not only for boys, but also for girls. And now the entire village was unified in their messaging to us that, education was really important both for boys and for boys and girls. And then I kind of started asking people around, because of course when I had visited other villages, water scarcity was a problem, and the fact that women and children had to go out and look for clean water was a big challenge. And if you have to do that for several hours a day, you can't go to school. So we asked around a little, and then it turns out that they had this solar-powered water supply that was, by UNICEF and by Sweden, and that had in itself become a solution for so many. And that's also this thing about climate change being holistic. That was also a solution, because if you have a basic service, access to water, then women and children don't have to go out and look for clean water, which means that if you have a village that then understands the importance of education, you can actually send your children to schools, and maybe the parent then can go out and work instead of looking for water. So for me, it was such a positive example of both an individual that, this woman, it was just I can see how she can turn minds like that, because she was really dedicated. But then you also have to have those basic services in order to allow systems and access to education to actually work. So I think that for me, that was one of those positive examples that I took with me, and how a solution on one way can also provide solutions and possibilities in others.
Pernille, can you also share any story which really, really impacted you personally as well, and especially in context to the work which you are doing, which you feel yes, this work is extremely important, and which is very close to your heart?
Yes, in December, I visited this flood-affected community in southern Punjab. It was south of Multan, and I had the opportunity to meet with the entire community and listen to them. And on that particular visit, I also brought my son with me as an experience for him also. And it was so incredibly humbling to sit before and listen to these various community members. And a number of women spoke, including one elderly woman who had lost her son in the floods, and who was now the caregiver, the protector of his 5 children, along with the son's wife. And the magnitude with which their lives had been turned upside down was so unbelievably striking. And yet she was not there to complain. She knew exactly what they needed and was able to articulate that, and also chart a way forward for her family that was, she was under very stressful circumstances, but also for the wider needs of people, her community members. And I will never forget how important they emphasized it seems like a given for so many of us in these privileged situations, but just having access to a toilet was over and over again emphasized, because all of that had been wiped out, the infrastructure, and for women and adolescent girls, how really deeply important this was, that they had access to facilities that were appropriate. And this is a space where the water was still in the fields. It had receded, but establishing those kind of facilities is not straightforward. Yet it was something that we committed to taking up right away. At the school just down the road, the school had been rendered no longer usable by the floods, and the water line surpassed 5 feet. And it was very visible, and I had my son stand next to that water line and we looked at it with just trying to imagine what the whole area must have looked like at that time, with being completely submerged. And then next door to it, there was the emergency child-friendly space, which was also a learning space for children, where they were accessing, and children were there and engaging and playing with badminton and some games, and you just saw the transformative impact of these types of interventions and trying to bring some normalcy back into their lives that had been so uprooted. Personally impactful, but heartwarming, and also, shocking how affected their lives have been, and how they kept going regardless. They had, they perhaps could have decided to go elsewhere, but they decided, we want to stay here, and we will rebuild.
Alex, what would be your message to the youngsters of Pakistan?
When I look at young people here, and I think we have come back to this repeatedly, I see an immense potential, and I see an immense will to move forward. And I see that people want to improve themselves, they want to educate themselves, but they also want to contribute to their communities and to their country. So, of course, my message would be to take every opportunity to do that. But I think that another message that should be sent to people around young people is to support them in this endeavor. Because of course I can sit here and say to young people, yes, educate yourselves and study abroad if you can, and take every opportunity you have. But there has to be a system and a structure around that facilitates that. So I think that my main message would be to people, and to people surrounding young ones, to support them as much as possible. Because again, and we have come back to this repeatedly throughout this conversation, this could be the path forward for Pakistan. And as Pernille also said, leaving your young population behind is then, we are not going to be achieving sustainable development goals, neither here nor globally. So I think it's more a message to decision makers and people around young people, that if you invest in young people, you will invest in your future. And that is said with all, care and respect for the fact that there is a lot of other challenges in this country, and also in the region and in the world, that demand our attention. And there are more immediate economic crises that also demand attention. but then there is this long-term investment that you have to do in access to nutrition and to education, that will also pave the path for young people and eventually also for the country.
Pernille, what would be your message to a young person who's watching this? One, about the work which you guys are doing, and most importantly, what's the hope for that youngster, from Pakistan, from government, from development sector?
So the smartest investment that the government can make is, and the nation can make, is in its young people, starting from age 0 all the way through, so that every young person reaches their full potential and has really the opportunity to move, to grow, and to learn, and to follow a pathway that they find fulfilling and is also impactful for the nation. I've seen really incredible commitment already from the government, starting from the Prime Minister, who has established the Prime Minister's Youth Office. Just last week, we launched Generation Unlimited, which is part of a global public-private partnership. We had the global CEO of Generation Unlimited here as well for the week with us. And we brought private sector together with government, federally as well as provincially. These efforts by government have already brought together about 800,000 young people through the Digital Youth Hub. And that's just one aspect. There's a lot of different kind of empowering means through which young people are getting skilled, are getting connected up with jobs, and the Youth Hub is like the connector for that. That needs to go into the millions, given the size of the population. And my message for young people is find out what are the skills that are most in demand right now. How does that match up with your interest? Make sure you get foundational learning. You may not need to complete all, your entire kind of high school education, but you must have the foundations in order to contribute and to really take up the opportunities that are available, whether as employment or being resourceful yourself. I've met incredibly, resourceful young women, for instance, in Lahore. She, one that who stands out to me, and I'll never forget. She's in an after-school program. She's 16 years old, and she's in a wheelchair. And through digital kind of tech skills, she started an online business that she could do from her home and is now earning her income. And that's through her combination of being tech savvy skills, but also the initiative and resourcefulness that she herself demonstrated. And it's transforming her life. And that's a small business that's taking off. That is the future of young people today, because at a global level, I think jobs are only going to be maybe a quarter or a third of the available for the population that there is of youth. And the gap means that young people themselves have to be resourceful in putting together a portfolio of work or having an entrepreneurial kind of future for themselves. So go for it. You have the potential. You have, we're behind you and your biggest supporters. But we want you to make sure that you're also taking up all the opportunities in terms of learning, skilling that are either already available or, demand for them to be available.
Also, I think especially after AI and internet, I think everything is just like so easy. You just need to have internet connection and a mobile phone, and like you can learn really everything now.
Exactly. All these courses are available for free online, including through the Digital Youth Hub, including through Generation Unlimited. You can get connected with a huge volume of materials.
Pernille, Alex, thank you so much for taking time out. It's lovely talking to you. Thank you for your
Thank
time.
you.